Okay. Hello and welcome to Rainbow Space Magic. This is the Writing Queer Stories for Middle Grade and Young Adult panel. Thank you everybody for waiting while we worked out our technical difficulties. Before we get started, I want to go over a few quick logistics. You are welcome to use the chat and talk to each other and share recommendations in a respectful manner. The panelists will be playing around in there too. If you would like to submit a question to the panel, please use the Q&A function or put a question mark before the question so it's obvious for our tech person and our panelists that that's a question you want answered. We will be answering questions closer to the end of the panel, but feel free to write them as you think of them. After the panel, the conversation can continue on Discord for this panel. Now I will hand it over to the moderator. Surprise, it's me, I'm your moderator. I'm Genevieve Clovis. I'm an editor, author, and writing coach, and member of the Rainbow Space Magic team. And I am very excited about this panel today. And we're just gonna dive right in. It is pre-recorded, which is why your panelists will be available to play with you in the chat. And the Q&A will be live at the end. Okay, here we go. Welcome to our panel discussion on writing queer stories for middle grade and young adult audiences. This is going to be a great talk, so let's just dive right into it. Some of us are writers, some of us are editors, and one of us is a translator. So many of us do multiple things. Let's all briefly introduce ourselves and share what kind of work we do on middle grade and young adult. Karen, would you like to start us off?
Sure. Hi, everybody. I am Karen A. Parker. I use they, them pronouns, and I am a speculative fiction author and Author Accelerator certified fiction book coach. And I pretty much run the gambit in terms of what I write and what I edit, but it's all within the speculative fiction umbrella. In fact, I am querying, as of this moment, an upper YA, POC-coded, queer normative epic fantasy with some Buddhism in there.
That's fabulous. Oh my gosh.
Please buy the book when it comes out once I get age.
Absolutely, yes. Chloe.
Yeah, I'm Chloe Spencer. My pronouns are she, her, hers, and I am an author of both adult and YA fiction, predominantly in the horror genre, but I do a lot of genre blending as well. A lot of my works have romance subplots and things like that, a lot of queer romance and sapphic characters. Yeah.
Very nice. I think that's true of a lot of horror. There's a lot of overlap in other genres as well, which is always fun. Yeah. Heather.
Yes, I'm Heather O'Malley. Like Chloe, I do both YA and adult fiction, mostly adult right now. I'm working on several YA books, trying to get them out there. It's a process.
It sure is, but we're all rooting for you. All right, and Tanya.
Hi, I'm Tanya. My pronouns are they, them. I am a book editor. I translate from French to English, and I'm also an educator. I edit middle grade, YA, and up. I teach writers who are working on middle grade, YA, and up, and most of my translations have been middle grade and YA graphic novels.
That's so much fun. So let's talk a bit about middle grade and YA in general. So what's something that makes these different from literature for adults, from literature for younger audiences, and also from each other, because there's a pretty big difference between a middle grade book and a young adult book. What do you think, Chloe?
Yeah, so I think that when it comes to the differences between YA and adult books, a lot of YA books are supposed to focus on the teenager, so it's supposed to focus on that teenage protagonist. And I think that from all I've been to quite a lot of workshops and panels with other YA authors and other people that work in the same genre. And I can't say that there's anything definitively that separates YA too much from the adult landscape, aside from maybe not going into as much detail in terms of like intimate content and things like that, or sexual content and things like that. But I find that like a lot of YA, especially nowadays, looking at Andrew Joseph White's work, who is, has won so many awards, and his books are just perform outstandingly. Um, his books don't really shy away from like a lot of graphic and like super intense content. But adult books are not really, but adult books tend to focus more on adults, and they tend to have a lot, while they can have teenage protagonists, I find that that's a little bit rarer. But in the YA world, at least, there should always be a teenage protagonist. It should be told from that teenager's point of view.
Interesting. Anybody have any thoughts on that?
One of the things I always think about with YA literature in specific is that it's all about things that are new for the protagonist. Adults, you have a lot more experience to draw off of, a lot more connections you can use to learn about things. For teen protagonists, they don't know a lot of this stuff, so it's a lot of discovery of self and the world, and learning how to integrate with the world. However the author presents it, this character is trying to deal with things not being what they thought they were as a kid. And I think that's one of the big stepping points from YA. With middle grade, it's, things are not exactly like you thought they were as a kid, but they're still somewhat close. Like Jose Arrete's books about Benny, who like meets a musical ghost and stuff, and so it's kind of gentle. YA gets into sometimes really intense stuff, but always the protagonist has very little connection to what's happening and is discovering it and trying to figure out how to respond. And I think that's always interesting.
Yeah, I think there's this misconception with middle grade and YA that you can't deal with tough topics, and you can, and kids are dealing with tough stuff all the time. So, of course, we should be writing about this. I mean, really, what I see, it's not necessarily a distinction from adult novels, but it's more important in kidlit in general for readers to be able to see themselves in the protagonist, in their experiences, in the emotional age of the protagonist, as well as, I mean, the physical age, if that you can call it that, isn't necessarily quite as important, but the emotional age really is. That they can feel seen by it and show them that their experiences are valid and they're things that they can get through. Yeah, and like you were saying, Heather, coming of age experience is really, really important in both of those.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's great. That
I'm kind
emotional.
of, yeah, sorry.
No, you go ahead.
Yeah, I must admit that I am woefully underread in the middle grade sort of spectrum. I've mostly like when I was in my MFA program, I was reading like YA Afro fantasy, so The Gilded Ones, Forged by Blood, Children of Blood and Bone, and the last middle grade book I think I read wasn't fantasy. It was Crusita and the Body of Shadows by Ashley G. Granillo, which is a fabulous book. And how I'm sort of keeping middle grade and YA sort of separated in my head a little bit is middle grade is about, for me at least, the middle grade genre is figuring out who you are and where you are in the world, like figuring out who your family is, what your culture is, and like what equipment you got when you were born and what, your social status is. And then YA is like, okay, what am I going to do with that equipment? What am I going to do with what I've learned to change the world or to change my community or to get out there and be an adult and like make something new and carve that new space, whether that's fighting a revolution or learning to accept your powers and do something with them against a big bad villain. So that's how I'm kind of keeping those two separate in my head.
It's really interesting, isn't it, when we talk about like speculative fiction in general, because it's not always set in this world and grounded in these elements that we have. So, you middle grade, you have these school experiences. YA, you have these high school experiences, and those are really in contemporary realism or
Yeah,
contemporary fantasy that
exactly.
really ground a lot of that. But it's it's fascinating when you think of like historical fiction and how you don't necessarily have that. And kids were out in the world in a different time, but it's still so much about friendships and family and all that. And then
Hmm.
relationships outside of that, like you were saying, Carrie.
I think there's a lot of those milestones that we go through at certain ages, and that's sort of
Yeah.
what translates into the writing, regardless of what world you're setting it on, right? It's like these are sort of the things that you're aiming for. Um, I think you all had some very excellent points. I liked, Heather, you said middle grade is, we talk about things gently. And I like that because we talk about heavy topics, but we just do so in a slightly different manner. And I think that's a really interesting way to phrase that. Um, and is certainly the case in a lot of the middle grade that I've read, where it's still heavy topics, but it's done in such a way that you don't feel burdened by it. So that's really great. So how are these things, middle grade and young adult, different when we throw queer characters into the mix?
Personally, I don't think it needs to be all that different. I One of the most common comments I get on a lot of my books is the fact that I just basically go, okay, the world's terrible, but you're okay, and this is who you are, and it's only a part of you, not all of you. Because too many books lean into the queer aspect to the point where that's all you get. It's all queer, and you're like, that's nice and all, but
Mhm.
what about the adventure? What about the stuff? That's not all a person is. And uh, young adults, they're really learning that their identity is not just one or two things, it's all these things.
Mhm.
And so being able to just say, and this is a part of who you are. Like
Yeah.
the protagonist in my young adult series that I'm trying to get out is a trans girl. But I don't come straight out and say, oh, you're a trans girl. I have like one of the older brothers say, you were more fun when you were a boy, and stuff like that. So I talk around it because it's a part of the lived world, and you can figure out that they're trans and not, this is so and so, they're a trans girl, here's all the things you need to know, because kids get this stuff in a lot of ways. And so why talk down to them?
Yeah, jumping in. Sorry, I don't know if anybody can hear me. This is Coconut. He gets
Yep.
really jealous when I'm on Zoom calls specifically, so he's jealous. So that's why
Coconut wants to be a part of the panel. I
he
understand.
wants
It's
to
a
be a
great
Hi,
All
part of
right.
the
right.
Coconut.
panel. So welcome
And there
as
goes
well.
Coconut.
That's great. Anyways, that's typical Coconut behavior. Anyways, I was gonna say that yeah, I don't think that there's too much of a difference when it versus like I think YA or a middle grade with like straight characters versus queer characters, except in the sense that you might be talking a little bit more about identity, and I think it kind of depends upon how deep that character is in sort of that coming out journey. But I think what we're seeing of a lot nowadays, a lot of the times like the characters aren't necessarily dealing with coming out. Like I don't really do that in a lot of my work. There's only one book that I can really think of off the top of my head where I wrote a character that was kind of coming to terms with queerness, but a lot of them are just kind of queer from the start. Yeah.
Yeah. I think it really depends on the world that you're creating
Mhm.
and how normative it is to queerness. And I love that there are so many stories like some of you creating queer norm worlds, and I want more of that. It's just that's such a amazing and wonderful thing, and it gives me hope. And in that situation, they don't have to be different, but in worlds that are more like the one that we're living in or based off the ones that we're living in. I don't know that we can necessarily just ignore the fact that our characters are queer because queer kids have different lived experience than straight and cis kids, and they're going to be moving through the world in a different way. And it doesn't necessarily have to be that all the bad things are happening to them, but that they understand that their existence is different and that that we show that to a certain degree.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And I think that there's room for both and there should be room for both.
Yeah.
But I am always going to be on the side of, well, like this character happens to be trans or non-binary or whatever they are. Like it doesn't have to be a big deal. But if it is a big deal, it is a part of the story, then the story will shape and mold however around it needs to. I think the trend, in a sort of ironic way, we've had so many stories of like LGBTQ tragedy and bullying that where that agents aren't really looking at anymore. We want more queer joy, which is a good thing. But I also don't want to close us off to the realities, you know.
Yeah.
So there part of it is market, part of it is political just leaning and shifting in the landscape, and part of us is, I mean, we're just gradually getting more educated. But I'm very much like, I don't want us to fall on the extremes, because I do want those things to be explored in any genre for any age group.
And I think it does depend on like what your purpose is in writing, you
Yeah,
know, and that's going to
sure.
have a huge impact on, am I telling a story of a person who happens to be queer, but they're going on this grand adventure and that doesn't really matter? Or am I telling the story of them figuring out who they are within the realm of being a queer person? And am I that? And where do I fit in that spectrum, right? So
Yeah.
I think your intention really comes down to it, and that there's space for all of these stories, and like the more the better, because we need more of it, and it's clearly having an impact, because like Tanya said, you know, it's better now, and kids who are reading middle grade and young adult stuff now are in I don't know, somewhat different, somewhat better, in some regards better, place than when we were younger and reading those books to find people our age to connect with. Okay, so what's one reader expectation in middle grade or young adult queer science fiction or fantasy?
I think the big one is that you have a queer protagonist.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean that's really the only thing. It doesn't necessarily, I think, like we were just talking about before, it doesn't have to be in a place where it's dealing with queer issues. It just has to be, there just needs to be a queer protagonist in there.
And
Yeah.
I think that that expectation, that Tanya mentioned, like there's that expectation because we have more openly queer readers. Like there's just it's it is expected because we want it. We want our world and our experience to be reflected in the things that we read now. We've always wanted that, and we
Yeah.
haven't gotten it. And we're just like, you know, give it to me right now.
I think that's something to, there's so many adults reading YA, and I think there's
That, yeah,
probably
we hadn't talked
more.
about crossover. Yeah.
Yeah, there's a lot of queer adults reading queer YA looking for those books that we wish we had when we were younger as well.
I
Hmm.
think one of the other expectations is that it's story driven. So they want your character to be queer, but the story does not necessarily have to revolve around it. But you have to feel who the character is, and whatever the story takes them, and whatever challenges they have to face, this is just a part of things, and it may not be a solution to anything. And they may have fun moments, where, oh, I just got my first same-sex kiss, how cool. And they can possibly contrast it with something else or not. You can have all these fun moments, but they want the story to really be the big thing and not the identity of the character.
In terms of like the expectations that I've seen in middle grade versus YA. I don't write middle grade, but I did try to approach how to write young YA because I kept getting approached by a lot of people at conventions and things like that, looking for middle grade or like more age appropriate, I guess like YA fiction or less mature, I guess YA fiction for their middle graders or like the people that were kind of in between. And one of the things that I noticed when reading like all this middle grade fiction, specifically in the horror genre, I noticed that a lot of times the middle grade fiction tries to teach about like moral lessons more so than like the YA fiction necessarily does. So like if there's a character that maybe is like less ambitious or I guess dare I say lazy or something like that, like they try to take like a lot of shortcuts, they try to not like maybe do chores or something like that, then it tries to sort of teach a lesson about that, which I think like there's an entire series of like middle grade books, which are kind of like Disney villain inspired, not queer specifically, but they're by Vera Strange. And all of those books I geared for middle grade readers, and all of them kind of teach like a moral sort of feeling about the protagonist. And most of those books actually end in pretty tragic circumstances, which I find interesting. Whereas I think like YA is less kind of black and white in terms of presenting morality, and it really allows kind of those gray areas to emerge, and there's a little bit more complex thinking patterns as that protagonist ages up.
That's fascinating. I can't say that I've seen that so much in middle grade, but it does have, at least not in terms of like teaching a moral and something bad about the protagonist, but there is certainly a much more black and white approach to this is right and this is wrong, and you know, you have that good versus evil, whereas in YA it is a little bit more of the gray area.
And I think that is to be expected if we're talking about expectations, because I mean, middle grade, I mean, it was all under one banner, under one flag before, children's and adults, and then it sort of fractured off as demands got more specific. But middle grade really has to be like, it has to mind its P's and Q's, because these readers they're like, the parents are buying these books for their children who are still in school, the teachers will want the kids to read, and so they have to think in terms of like societal ethics and you know, being a good friend to somebody and being a nice person. Like that is a given. That will always be an expectation, at least in a Western world like the United States or wherever the literature is. I mean, I don't know if we could talk about literature across the world or middle grade across the world, but that'd be probably another panel.
Yeah,
that would be an awesome panel, actually.
Yeah.
Cool.
And the thing
Just
is,
speaking from my educator role,
middle grade is more about teaching the societal ideas, because that's a lot of things kids are dealing with at that age range. Is they're starting to move out of just the pure kid thought, which is very self-centered and self-focused, to expanding to other people and other things. So friendship is a big thing. Family, how to be a good person, you know, how to interact with the world. And so these are all very societal driven ideas, and that fits within that range. And YA is, you know, you're starting to get people who are older who are starting to stretch out into the world and are trying to become something. And so that's why a lot of those books are about becoming something.
Yeah,
at least that's my 2 cents.
No, I think that's great input, because there's also that transition of learning that, okay, we said this is right and this is wrong, but in fact what we meant was like all of these things could be right and all of these things could be wrong, and there is some overlap and there's context that needs to be taken into consideration. So that's a very valid point of like, we're teaching the societal norms and expectations in that middle grade. I mean, and also all of them, but more so, a little bit more bluntly with middle grade.
Yeah, it's an interesting issue when we talk about how schools are involved as well. It's because you're not, when you're writing kid lit, whether it's middle grade, YA, or younger, you're not just writing for the target reader, you're also writing for the people who are buying the books, if you're talking about the market. And that makes it a little bit more complicated. And that's, librarians, parents.
Yeah, there's a bit of a barrier to get your books to the kids, right?
Yes.
But on that note, we're facing a lot of pushback against queer literature in general at the moment, but especially in kid lit. So have you encountered this personally or braced yourself for it in some way? How have you handled this situation?
Personally, since the main character in my YA series is a young trans girl, and is like, the story starts with her like 11 or 12, and it moves up through high school, because I was like, I don't like JKR, and I want something more fun and twisted. And so I came up with something that's much more balanced in terms of identities. And so this main character, she is exploring her identity. She is exploring all these things, but it's also in context with all the other things going on around her. And she's trying to learn how do I deal with this? And societal pushback is one of the factors in the story, because part of it is the evil fairies who are screwing with everything want to make human beings conform to an ideal. And that ideal is very much, don't think, don't question, don't step out of line, don't do these things. And, a bunch of other people are like, but why? That doesn't make sense. We should be free to be who we are. And so her identity is a part of that. And so, yeah, I mean, are those books ever going to sell? I have no idea. I mean, the market gets weird, and politics makes it even murkier. So all I can do is tell the story that wants to be told, while at the same time making sure that my characters, and thus the readers, can get some ideas on how to deal with it.
Have not dealt with being confronted with these topics personally yet, because I need to get an agent and get this novel out. But I would like, my first inclination is just, really, if you are confronted and that happens, reach for your community, reach for your sensitivity readers, reach for others that are writing as well, and don't I would not go this alone. I would hire sensitivity readers just for my own sanity. And because really that's what that confrontation, I feel like, is really about. It's designed to shame you into not doing this thing that they don't like. And the antidote to shame, I think, is just being with other people and being like, no, this is okay. Like, you're not, like, once you see past the insult or the thing, and you start to see the intent behind it, it doesn't, I hope it doesn't get to you. Or I would hope that it wouldn't get to people. But that's my game plan. If that does happen, I would just remember that I'm not one person. I'm not alone. I'm not a bad person. Like, this is not something inherently wrong with me. It's just how the world is, and this is just how they view things, or the other perspective views things, unfortunately. So I would say, for any writers that are listening to this panel, or editors, or anyone that's feeling any pushback right now, is just like, it's understand that the intent is to, like, stuff you down, and not to engage in this behavior or this thing, and also, like, really, chain link with your community.
Yeah.
The society really wants to, in a lot of ways, especially the dominant political thing going on right now in this country, is shove down anything that's not within a very narrow parameter. But the thing is, writing these stories is not bad. If someone writes a story that is problematic, that's a problem. Writing a story where a kid just happens to be different, that's not problematic. You're not creating a problem. You're addressing an issue that they don't
Right.
want to exist.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, from my perspective, I thankfully do not have the level of influence where I think I've been targeted by book bans or anything like that for my published works, or have like faced a ton of harassment. But I think just as a horror writer in general, there are a lot of people that have very strong opinions on horror writers. There are a lot of people that don't understand horror as a genre. And so because you write bad things, they want to insinuate that you are a bad person. So it's kind of, I get hit with like a double whammy on occasion, where it's like it's not only just the queerness that I address in my stories, but it's also the horror and the like the trauma that my characters face. And I can do my part in terms of hiring sensitivity readers and in terms of putting in content warnings. But I think unfortunately right now we're in kind of a climate where not only are queer people under attack, but I think art as a whole is under attack. There are a lot of people that don't seem to understand that art is valid in a variety of forms. It doesn't have to just be there to comfort you, although I do love cozy fantasies. I do love rom-coms and things like that. I write a lot of like subplots with romance, but art doesn't necessarily just have to comfort you. It can be there to educate, bring awareness to something. It can make you uncomfortable, and that can be a valid thing for it to do. So I think that honestly, to be a little bit, not to be aggressive or anything, but I think if people are getting pissed off, I'm doing the right thing, and I'm just going to keep doing it.
Yes.
So another thing though that I've done is I have joined Authors Against Book Bans. I live in the state of Minnesota, so while I'm fortunate in that there's not like a ton of like book bans here that are going on or anything like that, there are occasionally some like kind of cases or districts where things have been challenged. And so that's one way that I've been able to really like kind of get involved with the writers here and this specific community here.
Yeah, I haven't faced much pushback at all. I make a point to be very inclusive in my translation practices, and I have had some really vicious reviews about that. But whatever, there's always going to be haters out there, and that's their problem. Um, But in terms of like bans and that kind of stuff, I do get asked this question a lot by authors. Um, and my response is generally, even if our books do get banned, there's always a place for us. There are always kids who will need to see themselves and their experiences in these stories. And while there will always be places that block our stories and target us, there will always be places where queer literature is distributed or sold, and readers will find the stories that they need to read. And there was also some really positive news in August, where a federal judge ruled in favor of authors and publishers challenging that Florida House bill. I'm not sure if you all heard of that, which basically the House bill barred, quote, pornographic materials and content that, quote, depicts or describes sexual content from school and classroom libraries. And the judge deemed this vague, overbroad, and First Amendment violation. And that really gives me hope.
Well, I mean, that would immediately ban Romeo and Juliet.
Yeah.
They are in bed in like Act 3 or something. So,
And that's studied in pretty much every high school, in at least
oh,
in English-speaking
and
countries. Yeah.
usually in freshman year, when kids don't actually understand that it's not a romance.
Yeah, so there's a lot of hope. And I mean, it's lovely that all of you have said that you haven't had a lot of pushback. So, I mean, like, that's great that if and maybe you're still on a smaller scale with your writing, but like, write, just like get out there and do it. And to go back to something that Karen had said about leaning on your community, and if you get that pushback when you're trying to put your book out there, when you're trying to find an agent or an editor or whoever it is that you're saying, hey, give me advice on this, if they push back on you, they're not the right editor or agent for you. There's no reason to keep going forward. Just say okay and move on to the next person, because there are other agents, there are other editors, and there's so many of them who are not just willing but excited to help you and support you and get your stories out there. So just because one person pushes back doesn't mean that you need to give up. You always keep going and just look for your people, find your community so that you can lean on them. And most of the people at this conference are your community, so talk to them.
Absolutely.
So our final question: in your field, either writing, editing, or translating, are there any techniques that you employ or research that you do to try to get a better understanding for your audiences?
Nothing like reading other books in the genre. Tried and true.
Yeah, contemporary ones that are out like in the last 5 years, especially
Yes.
because it's
Yeah.
changing
Yes.
so quickly.
Traditional publishing, it has to be within the last 5 years. Better last 3.
Yeah. Talk to kids if you can.
Mm.
Pay it to, and things like that, because they're the ones, they're your audience, but they're also your inspiration. I have grandkids. Just seeing what they go through and how their interests are sparked and how they pay attention to certain things but not others tells me, okay, I should pay attention to these things and not others. And then I try and, when I interact with other people's kids and stuff, see how they react. So pay attention to the kids around you and see what they think is really cool and really interesting, because that might give you something to jump off of.
Also their language,
Oh yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Slang is always changing, and half the time I'm like, what is this child saying to me?
Do I gotta
I don't think
do
I
I
could write
gotta
this.
do I gotta speak Gen Z? Do I gotta be Giga Chad and talk to Chad? And...
One of the series I translate is in a video game world, and I am not much of a gamer. And luckily, I have friends with kids who game a lot, and I can just be like, does this make sense as a translation? This is what they're trying to say. Is that the right word? Is that what you all are using
That
right
sounds
now?
like fun.
Oh, it's
That
great.
sounds amazing.
I'm really grateful for their kids. I also really like this book. Of course,
Oh
I don't.
yeah.
Yeah, the
Oh,
Magic
I've seen that
Words.
one.
Cheryl Klein. Especially the first few chapters, the opening chapter. There's a lot of general writing advice in it, but the opening chapters are really, really good at boiling down basically a lot of what we've been saying in this panel into practical advice. Yeah.
Amazing. Any thoughts, Chloe?
In terms of finding inspiration, I kind of like the idea of being in touch with like your inner teenager, or really like your inner child. I'm really fortunate because like my parents saved actually a lot of the stories that I wrote growing up. And so one of the things that I did like this past year was I ended up kind of revisiting those things. And I think that that's actually helped like inspire me a little bit. But I think it also like I've noticed that there's a trend, I guess, as people get older, that they tend to like distance themselves from kid things a little bit, or even YA or like teenager things, and that they kind of find them cringe. And I think that the most important thing is to have respect for your younger audience and know that you were in that position. You were just like them. For me, like a little like 10 years ago, I was 19. So I think that it's really important to kind of try to pay homage to that inner child or that inner teenager as you're working on your writing.
I love that.
Yeah.
I also love that your parents kept all your stories and you can see what little you was writing. That's
some of
so
them are so
wonderful.
cursed. Some of them are so bad. Yeah, some
You have to
Properly
start
cursed, because you're a
somewhere.
horror writer. Properly cursed.
Yes, it's kind of incredible because like there was one story that I found that it had such a dark kind of twist in it that I was like, I don't even think as an adult I could come up with this. I don't think middle school me was doing okay. But she grew up to be me, and so she would be very happy. Yeah.
Oh, that's fabulous. Okay, so that's it for now. Let's head on over into the Q&A and see what's going on there. Fabulous. We do have some questions sitting here for you. So here we go. First question is from Sarah Grace. Do you have thoughts on how or if indie self-published queer speculative fiction, middle grade, young adult, can succeed in finding an audience? That's a hard one.
That is a hard one.
I mean, I guess there's two parts. Sorry, go ahead, Heather. I'll follow.
My whole thought is the indie market is growing. To make it, there's a lot of steps you have to do. But first and foremost, write the good story. A good story, if it finds the right people, word of mouth will spread, and it will slowly build a market. Above all, write a good story. Then you have to do the annoying work of trying to find a publisher, trying to market, trying to do all the annoying things of being a writer. But the story should come first.
I think there's two parts to this question, really. There's whether it can physically reach readers, which is really a matter of how you're publishing it and how you're distributing it. And I know other people here, like Genevieve, you'd be able to better speak to the intricacies of what that means. But then there's also reaching a readership, which is what Heather was describing. And ultimately it comes down to a lot of marketing after you've written the book. Yeah, and getting in front of all those readers, getting in front of, depending on the age, getting in front of the teenagers, the 8 to 12-year-olds or their parents. Yeah.
I think it's the same as finding an audience for any book that you have self-published. It's a lot of work, right? But you do have to put yourself out there and, join events like this because, 3 of the people on this panel have said that they've got a published book and are hopefully going to share that link with you later. And now look, they've just reached a whole bunch of readers. And maybe most of you won't buy their books, but maybe like 2 or 3 of you will, and maybe one of you will love it and one of you will tell their friend, and then you've got the word of mouth thing going. And word of mouth is always going to be your strongest asset for getting your book out there because you only have so much time and energy for marketing. So let other people do it for you.
Word of mouth is
Oh, did Karen just freeze?
I think we lost Karen for a sec.
Yeah, technology is fun.
Okay, I'm getting a 2-minute alert. So we're going to do our next question. How do you find queer middle grade and young adult books to read that aren't being pushed by the big publishers, trad publishing? Are there any systems you'd like to see implemented to better promote these books?
I can speak to that. So how I actually went about finding one of my publishers is that I ended up looking through a lot of smaller, I looked at like a lot of independent fiction online. And so that's how I came across Tiny Ghost Books, which is who I signed my first YA novel with Monster Sona. And so I would say that like when you're shopping, when you find something that you really like online, do some research on the publisher, pull up like the metadata and see like what exactly that publisher can do. Because the thing that I liked about Tiny Ghost when I first signed with them is that they put together these really, really great illustrated covers. And they had a whole kind of like marketing team, which was really nice because I did not want to do that much work marketing. So I think it involves being a little bit curious about the kind of things that you are reading and looking up, and just doing a little bit of a deeper dive, even when you're just looking for things that you want to read.
And related to finding books that you want to read, I'm going to post a couple of links to LGBTQ reads, and they have middle grade and young adult lists, and they're awesome resources broken down. There's like a sci-fi section. There's all sorts of different queer identities as well within those lists. I'll share those on Discord as well.
I was just going to ask. Karen, you were in the middle of saying something when Zoom decided to be mean to you.
Very
do you
mean.
want to finish that thought?
So I don't think I heard the second question, but I'll try and answer the first question. And I want to pinpoint on the word succeed, because success is going to look different depending on what your goals are. And if you self-publish and you want to be the next Andy Weir, that's going to be tough. That's going to be really tough. You have to write a brilliant book to get like Andy Weir, Hugh Howey level, like fame, TV deals and stuff. And that is a different ball game than if you are just publishing it for a handful or hundreds of people, or just a small community, or you're doing it as part of like a series and you're doing the long game. So get detailed on what success would look like in your chosen communities, but thankfully, a lot of the techniques are similar across traditional publishing and self-publishing as well, because in the cases with traditional publishing, people are like, well, you have an Instagram account, go make some reels. Like, go do that. You don't have to make reels if you don't want to. There are other ways to be social and to promote your stuff online. Amelia Fruby, who is the host of the Off the Grid podcast, would be a good person to follow and to look at. She just launched a book called Your Attention is Sacred, except on social media, that I just bought and I'm looking forward to reading. So I will put Amelia Ruby in the chat as well. But that's the first question. What was the second question? If you answered it, or did you get to it?
Yeah, we answered it, and I don't know where it went.
Oh dear.
How do you find queer books to read that aren't being pushed by the big publishers? But I think Tanya answered that pretty thoroughly,
pretty succinctly,
and gave us some good links to follow. So, and I've already let us go over time a little bit. So
yeah, no worries.
Thank you to our fabulous panelists for your insights into writing for middle grade and YA audiences. You can join the conversation in the Discord and join us for the keynote with Sam Maggs, which is after this at 3 p.m. Eastern. We didn't have a chance for me to tell all of the panelists to shout out their work. So please, panelists, go into Discord and put links to your work so that we can all support you. Thanks, everyone, and we'll see you soon.
Thank you, everybody.
Thanks.
Thanks. Bye.